Welcome back to Switch to Linux, another fun outdoor discussion. Today I want to talk of Luddites and Linux geeks. I was thinking about this the other day with a friend of mine as we're just kind of talking about being online all the time and some of the consequences that has, because to be sure, there are a lot of consequences to being 100% perpetually and forever connected. And one of the things is I'm looking at goals and achievements and accomplishments and things like that right now is I'm recognizing that I'm spending way too much time in front of the internet, in front of the computers, and I think it's actually causing my work to be less efficient at doing so. And so as we look at what we can do about that, the thing I'm thinking of is, finding very specific time to completely disconnect from all of the computers, which is difficult in the van as small as it is and having ready to access everything. But what I'm finding is if you spend too much time watching videos, it can interfere with other things. Of course, if we spend too little time with it, that can interfere with some other things like learning and education and things like that. But I got to thinking about it, and a few things got me thinking about it. The first thing was, as I was out looking around at the world and things, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he, significantly younger than me, he grew up at a time when they were 100% always connected to the internet. And I remember growing up without the internet at all. And one of the things I mentioned to him is, for sure people think, well, you grew up when, and then they want to get onto the internet and prove you wrong. Kind of like Walmart, right? First time I was ever in a Walmart was in the early 90s. If you do the internet searches, you'll find Walmart's been around for years and years and years. The problem is there weren't a lot of them around. They were not as ubiquitous as they are now. And that's how the internet was. Most people did not have access to it. Even those who did have access to the internet, it wasn't access to the internet that was full of a lot of the useful information. It wasn't super fast. It was sometimes you clicked something and you waited 20 minutes and you did something else and you came back. So you didn't do a ton of research on there. Just if you couldn't find your research on other topics in other places. And the reality is that made us dumber. As we gave ourselves to perpetual internet research, we made ourselves dumber, because with everything always at your fingertips, why bother learning, right? That's kind of the, I forget the name of the short story from Isaac Amasky, whatever, I forget his name. One of my favorite science fiction authors, and I forget, Isaac whatever his name is. You know who I'm talking about. Let me know in the comments. One of the short stories that he did was talk about how the technology prevented anybody from learning how to do basic math. And he did basic math, and it was amazing. Everybody, they're like, wow, how are you doing that? All this kind of stuff. He's like, well, I just figured out what all this means. And so that's kind of where our society has devolved into. We have devolved into a society of people who are effectively morons because we have ready access to everything at our fingertips, and so we never bother learning anything. And this causes negative impacts for our life and our behavior. So because of this, I've decided, I'm going to take just a little bit extra time every day away from the internet. And then I already got out in places like this and walk as much as I possibly can. But I need to take some time in the van working on other things without the internet around. And that's the thing that I wanted to look at doing. But then I got into thinking about it and look at the devices that we have that assume you are perpetually connected, right? And so your Windows, your Mac, these things will do checks against various different things. Anytime you do certain aspects, certain stuff on your computer, you'll go ahead and do that. So I was thinking back to the one content creator, it's like Jay Christina, I think it is. I can't remember for sure. He does a lot of things with digital arts and things like that. And he started doing, moving away from Adobe products and onto your products that do not require perpetual internet connections. He looked at GIMP and several other ones because he goes up on top of a mountain like this. There's no internet. And then what happened with him is he's found out that he could not even open the application because there's no internet connection. So if your internet's out, you can't even use these applications, assuming you have not intentionally. I believe you can set them up in such a way to do so, but it's not obvious necessarily. So he started moving people towards different directions. Remember, Napster still exists. You can download music. Most of it is WMA. Well, Windows 10 removed WMA connections. So at least for a while, not sure if it still is, if you have a WMA on your computer, you cannot listen to it offline because the codecs for Windows were stored on servers and it had to have an active internet connection to listen to a locally downloaded file. They probably fixed that at this point in time. I don't know. But I got to think about Linux distributions. There are some Linux distributions that assumes you have an always connected broadband connection. Right now I'm setting up a Nix OS system to test how it works on a Raspberry Pi. To do a basic configuration change, it wants to re-download and rebuild everything. And basically this means to go in and just simply do a host file redirect, it has to go online and download, I don't know how many packages. Every single time you just do something basic in the operating system. Well, that's kind of crazy. Now, I'm going to test it nevertheless and give it a final evaluation when I'm done. I noticed my Manjaro, if that thing is not connected to the internet at boot up, all sorts of weird hell breaks loose on that system. Your keys don't work, okay, let me explain. Going back on KDE for a while, when I was testing that out quite a bit, and who knows, maybe this is a KDE problem because I have Plasma on both of them. When you logged in, if you set an auto login, it would not unlock your passwords for your emails and things like that. So if I had auto login set, you log into your system, you'd have to log in one more time in order to access your email. Well, on my Manjaro build, if I go in there and I select on my Manjaro build and I go ahead and I select my, like if there's no internet connection, when I get in there, not only does my keys not work on my email, and I am logged in, by the way, this is not an auto login issue, I have to log into every email account individually. So if there is not an internet connection, when Manjaro opens, it does not recognize anything saved in the system. What is Manjaro doing checking the internet before utilizing keys on my device to check mail through Evolution or Thunderbird? That is a weird question. But Manjaro also messes up my desktop file. So it screws up all of my desktop configurations on Plasma. All that stuff is done if there is no internet connection when you boot the system up, which is very, very odd. Endeavor OS will give you warnings if you boot into the system and there's no internet connection. It'll go in, give you a pop-up, there's no internet connection. And then it starts to do all these other weird things. These are weird aspects. Now, conversely, my MX Linux computer has not been on the internet for 6 months, and it works perfectly fine. Granted, I only boot up a few applications, Lollipop for music, LibreOffice, a few other tools for writing books, really is all that gets done with that. But that computer does not have a hissy fit if I do not boot into the internet every single time I boot the computer on. So it makes me wonder, what are these doing? Even these auto online, always connected to the internet, broadband connections is even starting to apply to some Linux systems. And it makes me wonder, should I just go back to using our old raw Debian-based systems that do not assume a perpetual internet connection? Because some of the more modern distros, they are borrowing into the same idea of getting in, and I don't like that. Kind of odd, isn't it? So hopefully this crazy, weird outdoor rambling video gives you some things to think about. If nothing else, here's my basic takeaways. Number one, look for the operating systems, including the Linux distros, that are not looking for an always online perpetual internet connection. Number two, disconnect your brain from that online perpetual internet connection, because that online internet perpetual internet connection completely mushes our brain cells. It's kind of frightening. So we have to remember those things, keep such things in mind. With that, guys, we're going to leave this one here. Thanks for listening to this crazy rambly video, and I hope you got something out of this. If nothing else, you know, being a Luddite is a very good thing, particularly for a Linux geek, because we can learn how to adapt without having an internet connection. And we have got to figure out how to do that to maintain the best sanity for our lives. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.